Okay, we'll just go ahead and get started here. This is Ifan from the Strategic Day Trader, and this is your market wrap for February 11th, 2019. Q is basically unchanged here, just down 0.11%, and the SPY basically unchanged, up 0.05. So you can see on the daily chart here, we had a nice rally into the end of Friday's close. A good enough rally to cancel out any kind of bearish bias we had going into the close there. So came into this week neutral as we outlined. I think at the time that I was recording, we hadn't quite taken this out yet on the SPY. But once we did, that's why we outlined where we have to lose the bearish bias. And so gapped up today, the gap up got sold. That's usually what happens when we on a neutral bias, or if we have kind of time frame conflict, or any kind of indication that we're going into a sideways pattern, which is what we have here. So Qs and SPY going to be as neutral as we get going into tomorrow, which is fine because the focus will be on the names reporting earnings. I think it's because we just have some larger macro events that are still yet to be resolved. They're still up in the air. So market's kind of in a wait and see mode. I did check to see we do have some decently sized companies reporting. None of the really big names tomorrow from what I saw. I think maybe like Hun is a big one. Under Armour, kind of big. So a lot of the big ones were last week. We are starting to wind down a little bit, but still should be plenty of stuff to trade this week. Unfortunately, today was really, really slow. Really, really boring. I'm just seeing if there's anything else on my charts that that I could add to the list, because there were no calls from me, and and there were no trades. I had no trades. I did try. Couldn't get filled on this AVYA in the morning. This was my number one gap. This was my number one focus, and not at the open, which is nice. If you could have found a way in, I guess this little bit of a shakeout bar is not bad. I thought it was a little bit too spready in the morning. Didn't really show a good setup. But this sell setup here, Sammy had a call on it, and didn't get filled. This would have been a pretty good play here. Surely would have been a winner. I would have held on to it until it trailed out on the hourly here. So the back half would have been closed for break even just about, but the front half would have worked out well. And so the AVYA was really the only thing that I really wanted to be a part of. I like this gap. It is gapping into support. Now, if you recall in the open house, right, on this AVYA, we were all over this gap up, and now gapping down back into the support area. The next play I had that I was ready to play was a CAMT. If we could get a breakout over this space, we ended up going lower instead, which made my choice for me there. I guess if you were looking for that short, maybe you could call that a good short. I was looking for a long based on the gap. This is definitely a professional gap. It is into some resistance, but I like this gap for higher. So it didn't trigger the breakout there on this CAMT. A little bit steep on the retracement, actually made a new low after the morning. So usually I wait for a secondary entry, and this base would have been my secondary entry. Didn't trigger. No harm, no foul in the CAMT. And probably the biggest mover was the ATVI continuation from this gap. I don't know if there was something additional news-wise on this. But that's a good setup there. Nice price compression there before getting the wider range red bar there on the ATVI. I thought the setups weren't easy on this ATVI. Had to really kind of find your way in. That's not a bad 5-minute sell. Got a gap up that got sold, so that's pretty bearish. And then you had a low of the day breakdown in that. Got it going there. Another sell setup there, which, yeah, would have worked. Thought that was a little bit aggressive. Just given how much it had moved, and then just most of the bearish setups work on this ATVI. You can see the size of the daily bar there, and usually that's going to be the case on something moving like that. But I thought a lot of the stuff that looked decent didn't end up going. They didn't really give us good setups. Like I was watching this NSC in the afternoon. I guess this buy setup worked a little bit. Couldn't make a new high. The other one that we're looking at was the NUVA. Was looking to see if this would break out, broke down instead, so no play on that. So a lot of stuff that I thought had potential didn't really set up the setup I was looking for, and so that's gonna result in just a sit on hands day. Would have liked to got filled on this AVYA, just couldn't get filled on it, so that was the morning for me. And then in the afternoon, the ideas just didn't want to trigger there. I think more things kind of fall through to the downside this afternoon, so I was focusing a little bit more on the longs. I thought the setups were better there. So hopefully things change. I mean, given the market today, I guess it's not that surprising that a lot of things either didn't trigger or didn't go anywhere, because the Qs and SPY didn't really go anywhere. Hopefully that changes. I think if we get better gaps, because I knew from the get-go that the AVYA, even though this was my favorite gap, this was gapping into support, into the rising 20, while eventually showed weakness. The next support area is not far below. We were talking about, the kind of gaps that really on a day like today would just be stand out, would have to be played. Can't feel bad if it works. Something like this, if this gapped under like 1396, right? We'd be talking about a different quality of gap, clearing the support. But, this was kind of the best of what we could choose from today. And even then couldn't get filled. So, if there were a lot of things moving and I thought there were a lot of good setups, I'll go over them. Today was just kind of a slow Monday, which is, more common in the off season, these kind of slow, nothing to do Mondays. But, hopefully it's just because earnings season is winding down a little bit, and then as we get back into the middle of the week, we get a bigger earnings list, and then therefore more opportunities. Okay, so not a lot. It's gonna happen. It's just one of those days where it felt like had to kind of flex your discipline muscle and just stay out of trouble if your setups weren't there, and my setups weren't there or not triggering. So not a problem at all. Okay, but just going into the rest of the week, just know that, or going into tomorrow, will be neutral. Okay, gonna wait for this kind of, now we've explored higher and we've explored lower. Okay, so if we look at what we've done over the last week, that's going to be pretty much our guide here. Once we break out over resistance, look for higher, right? And then if we break below Friday's low, look for lower, but there is more support below. Okay, so if we break below, I think won't be a very big move, but I think if we break higher, there's more potential for follow through. So it's setting up. It's setting up for a move. The move is coming. I think the deadline, I think, is this Friday, so we may get something even ahead of that if there's a resolution or even some kind of clarity or as to what's going to happen. Okay, as far as the government shutdown. So we'll just have to wait and see. Really, really narrow day today on the SPY there, as you can see in the Q. So not much to do with it. We kind of came in today with a neutral bias after Friday's close. So we're going to stick with that going into tomorrow. All right. Hopefully, tomorrow there'll be a lot more to talk about, more setups to review, more charts to look at. Hopefully today, if anything, you got to brush off the rust from the weekend and you're ready to go and have a nice week. Okay. So we'll see what the market brings us tomorrow, and I will talk to you then. All right. Have a great evening.